gold trails and ghost towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts is my name, with Bill Barley, our resident historian, host, storyteller. And today, you know, we've done this once before. We've forsaken gold and silver, and we're going to do that again today.
We're going to talk about the Pittsburgh of the North. Now, the Pittsburgh of the North is, I think, probably the greatest coal town in British Columbia, Fernie.
In the Rockies.
Yeah, Fernie's right in the Rockies, and it's the, I think it's the jewel, kind of the undiscovered jewel of the Rockies. Now, Fernie has been there almost a century, Mike. It's still there, amazingly, and it was the distribution point for the whole area of that Crow's Nest Pass country.
Okay, so we're heading to Fernie in the Rockies, and we're talking about coal today. Back in just a moment with more. Trails and ghost towns. Only today it's coal seams, I suppose. Fernie,
Sure.
Named after a guy named Fernie, I would bet.
Yeah, interesting character, Mike. He was a prospector. He was a wanderer with his brother Peter, and he first tried Australia. Great gold fields in Australia. William Fernie and his brother didn't hit anything. So they transferred. New Zealand, good gold fields in the north part of New Zealand. After gold again, no luck. So he said, okay, it's a gold rush in Canada. So he went to Revelstoke, looked for gold there. Again, turned up nothing. Transferred to Caribou.
Had to find gold there. I mean, gold was common as salt and pepper there.
Not for William Fernie. Nothing in Caribou. Then he went down to the Wild Horse country, worked in the Wild Horse around 1864, nothing there. And then he became foreman on the extension of the Dewdney Trail.
Sort of gave up on this search for gold, did he?
That's right.
Okay, wise move, finally.
But he stayed in that Kootenai country. Something attracted him to that particular country. Marvelous part of the province, of course, anyway. And he became actually a mining recorder and government agent from 1876 to 1882. So that was a good paying job. But, you know, the prospecting bug, it bites once and there's no known cure. So, quit the job, good job, prospected for 5 years. Came across little seams of coal here and there, nothing to his liking. Finally, he and his brother came across a magnificent seam of high-grade coal just off a little creek, Michelle Creek, near Fernie today. And this was the beginning. Then they began prospecting very seriously. He's 50 years old now, Mike.
Yeah.
And he prospecting very seriously, staked a bunch of other ground, and formed what is called the Crow's Nest Pass Coal Company, which was the grandfather of all the huge coal operations in that East Kootenai country.
And how many communities eventually did we come up with that established with coal as their basis?
I'll mention some.
Okay.
Morrissey Creek, which is just outside of Fernie. Then there's Coal Creek. Then there's Hosmer. Then there's Natal. Then there's Michelle. Then there's Corbin. So those are the major towns. The small coal towns, far different than Fernie. The coal towns had miners, you know, that came from all sorts of different backgrounds. There were Italians, there were Yugoslavs, there were Englishmen, you know, who'd mined in England. There were Americans.
For example, I mean, when you take a look at the faces in this picture, maybe the guy in the middle, he looks maybe like he could be green, right? I mean, he doesn't look as gnarly as the others, but
he's carrying a safety lamp.
Well, they're all carrying that. I mean, that's what you had to have, because coal was coal dust and...
This is very, very what we call bumpy country. Very dangerous country through the Crow's Nest Pass. We'll discuss this in a future program on other towns, but it was some of the most dangerous country as for coal miners in Canada. No doubt about it at all.
And they would go into the mine, and this looks like a pretty, you know, the little gold mines had little such narrow openings at the beginning, but look, this has got this big horse in the middle of it, and they would... horses would do the trucking, I would take it.
Yeah, indeed they did. They pulled the coal cars out of the, at least in those early years, pulled the coal cars right out of the depths of the mine. Yeah. So what happened, of course, is Fernie becomes the headquarters. There are a bunch of little coal towns scattered all over the place. Yeah. And this is an era when coal is king. So the 1890s you're looking at, early 1900s.
All of the navies are still firing their ships on coal, all of smelting
the
and
railroads,
coking and all of this is...
railroads, the steel makers, the ships at sea, all of them are using coal. So this is a godsend. This is a real find. And what happens, of course, is that Fernie becomes the distribution center. It doesn't become an actual mining town. The headquarters of the Crow's Nest Pass Coal Company is in Fernie, where it should be. All the officers of the company are there. William Fernie is a very wealthy man by now, an extremely wealthy man. He does exceptionally well on his find, which he didn't do in gold. He makes it in coal. And there are mansions built in Fernie. But you know, what's funny about Fernie? Fernie's gone through some highs and lows. This was a high time between, well, Fernie they began to plot the town site in about 1898, and they had lots and streets and so on. Became a city in 1904, Mike. Has a population of about 4,500 people, over 4,000 people.
Now, this shot here shows it, for example. There's a great big train station right in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
We see all sorts of buildings and towns and hotels and banks. And I mean, this is a real place. And it must be scenic as can be with the mountains all around it.
Fernie is spectacular. I mean, you know, I could go on and on about Fernie. I'm extremely fond of Fernie. You pass right by it today, Mike, on Highway 3, which is called the Crow's Nest Pass Highway. But you pass right by Fernie. But you have to get off that highway about half a mile and go right into Old Fernie, because it is almost, well, it's the same as it has been for 75 years. Yeah. It's a marvelous town. And you know, there were at that time there were all sorts of hotels. There was the Fernie, and there was the Alberta, and there was the Napanee, and there was the King, and there was the Royal,
and look at that street goes on forever.
Oh,
that
sure
street
it
goes on
It shows
forever.
two of the hotels right there.
Yeah,
That's King's, and then the Napanee right next to it. But the other thing about this is two interesting things about that photo, Mike. One is wooden boardwalks, which is interesting.
You were always a fan of wooden boardwalks.
Oh, you bet I am.
You were, as a kid, always scalping coins from underneath.
You bet I was. All over the Kootenai country and all over the Boundary country, no doubt about it, and in the Okanagan to a degree, and in the Similkameen. And the other thing is that virtually every building on that avenue, which is Victoria Avenue, which was a show place. I mean, you go down the other coal towns, those little towns like Corbin and Morrissey and Coal Creek and Hosmer, nothing like Fernie. Fernie, you were going to the city. And they were all wooden buildings. Yeah. Now, foreshadowing, they should have known. But they were so busy building, so busy cashing in on their good fortune, they didn't bother to build a brick and stone. And there were a couple of rather serious fires that burned a block here and burned a block there. But on August the 1st, actually in August of 1908, one of the hottest years on record, Mike, the forests around Fernie were tinder dry. The creeks were low. And a little fire started in a little lumber camp, actually a little milling operation just west of Fernie, and it got out of control. And it was so dry that it started leapfrogging. And it was then accompanied by a high wind, heading straight for Fernie. It continued to head straight for Fernie, swept into Fernie, and ordinarily in these towns, Mike, you have time to blow up a couple of buildings in advance of a fire. This fire was coming at such a high rate of speed, the buildings were literally exploding in its path. In some instances, in one place it skipped half a block. It went right, those people were saved. 25 people perished in this fire at least. And people were running ahead of the fire, and the fire was catching up. 25 people did not make it.
Yeah. Remember that beautiful shot of Victoria Avenue? This is of that same town, just a few days later.
Shows the telephone poles.
It survived, and there's one building in the midst of this. This looks like Hiroshima photograph, you know?
It's just incredible. The whole town, Mike, virtually was devastated. People thought that Fernie would never recover. There were over 4,000 people. There was no place for them to go. There was virtually no food in town. 4 bridges had been burned. It was gone. It was gone. It was devastating.
Well, I mean, look at here. One you said they didn't build of stone and brick. Well, here's the Bank of Commerce.
Yeah, the Bank of Commerce decided to play it very, very carefully. Build of stone. Look what happened to the Bank of Commerce.
Nothing.
Virtually nothing. And the federal government used foresight for once, and this time they built of stone. That's the first post office.
That's the post office.
It's gone.
Gone. Now look at this. There's a huge sort of mass of something here. What is that thing that's sitting on the street?
What this is, Mike? What happened? They had everything in Fernie. They had a dozen hotels. They had banks. They had post offices. They had government buildings. They even had an opera house. The fire hit that opera house. It hit it so hard it lifted the metal roof right off the opera house and blew it for a block before it landed. Blew it for a block.
And of course, each one of these flaming projectiles would start fires further down the way.
People couldn't believe it. People who had lived through that fire simply could not believe it.
Here's a shot of some of the coal cars, and look at, they are just twisted masses. I guess any coal that would in it would begin burning at a tremendous degree, and it melted the metal coal cars.
Well, I mean, you know, there's coal cars that are made out of steel.
Yeah.
And they're good steel. CPR didn't waste time. They put good steel in their coal cars.
Yeah.
And those, they're literally charred. They're bent. They're turned.
Now, you said that there was nothing. I mean, these people were helpless. This shot right here shows obviously new buildings. Some sawmill whipped up some buildings, and these people are obviously coming to some sort of aid station.
Parts of the town, on one part of the town, was not hit that hard. They're going there to receive food, relief, and relief came in from all over. This was actually made headlines all across Canada. The Great Fernie Fire.
This is also a great shot too, because when I think of some of these early towns, these mining towns, I think of them being filled with just men. But here's a lady and her baby, and quite a few women, and these are families. This is the kind of thing that travel with coal mines.
Well, yeah, but this travels with a distribution center. You wouldn't find as many women out in the small coal towns surrounding Fernie.
Yeah.
But in Fernie itself, there'd be lots of business people there, and so they'd bring their families. There'd be railroad people there, Crow's Nest Pass Coal Company, and so on. So they all have their families.
What a disaster!
Oh,
like
yeah.
4,500 people suddenly, most of them without any homes.
Most of them without anything at all. And remember, everything went.
Yeah.
They didn't even have time to gather up their precious possessions. You know, if they had rings in the jewel box and they had gold coins, they didn't even have time. They had to head out that door immediately.
And run as fast as they could
some
go.
of these people made it by 30 seconds and 45 seconds from being incinerated by this fire. I mean, it was just that close.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, everybody thought it was going to die, but we've got some additional pictures that show that getting back, this almost reminds me of Kelowna and all the business about the hot dog stands, because here's a guy with a wagon, and he's selling something out of the wagon right
That's the first portable restaurant, and probably within a week after the fire, and this guy is an entrepreneur, and he decides to cash in on it.
That's Dark Angelo's. It says Dark Angelo's on there.
You know,
there's one of the names.
That's Trail Family, too.
Yeah, and look, here's a guy who set up his butcher shop using one of the remaining telephone poles to hang the beef on.
Sure, and not only that, he's distributing meat. He is probably paid either by the CPR or the coal company to distribute meat to the various people who survived the fire.
There is that funny building with that hip roof in the back that managed to survive. Did anybody figure it was some sort of blessed location?
I think it probably had a slate roof.
Yeah.
So that may have saved it.
Yeah. And then here is a shot obviously with snow coming down the hills. We presume this is the winter, the late fall of 1908, and quite a few new clapboard buildings going up.
Yeah, you can see, even in some of the other pictures, you can see they were taken a couple of days after the fire, and you can see tents in the background, and you can see new buildings starting to come up. And what happened, of course, Mike, was that I think people outside of Fernie felt that Fernie would never recover, would never come from the ashes, but the people in Fernie didn't believe that at all. They knew that they were the distribution point, that they knew they were the natural capital of the East Kootenay country, and the building began almost immediately. And so Victoria Avenue became the main thoroughfare again, but it changed Victoria Avenue. This was a Victoria Avenue covered with brick buildings and stone buildings. And when you go into Fernie today, Mike, you see really quite a magnificent town. You see a town 3/4 of a century old, in some parts older than that, but the majority of it is from 1908. And it is really quite unique. It has the echoes from the 1890s and the turn of the century. And some of the old hotels are still there. Some of the mansions that were there when Fernie was young are still there. Some of those were saved. And it has a special atmosphere. I feel that Fernie is one of those few towns in the province that really has that ambience of an old town. You can almost hear the stagecoaches coming down the street. You can almost see the wooden boardwalks. They're not there now, of course, but Fernie is that type of town.
Now, and again, there are so many cultural groups, because I imagine a lot of Lancashiremen or Britishers would come over because they knew the coal business. They'd be there. So many Czechoslovakian, Italian, all these people would come in.
Large Czechoslovakian and Yugoslavian community in that area. Very large Italian community, somewhat similar to Trail and the old Gulchen Trail, the enclaves of the Italians in that town. And many of the families are still there. The original Italian families who came there at the turn of the century, their descendants are still in Fernie. Yeah. And of course, many old people like the Quayle family, and so they've been there since Bill Quayle gave me a lot of background on Fernie.
I noticed the name attached to all of these photographs is Spaulding. Yeah. I mean, was he one of the well-known photographers, or did he just happen to be the man in the place?
I'm trying to remember whether Spaulding came from Fernie or came from Calgary, and I'm not sure. I can't tell you that, and there was nothing on to confirm that or deny that on the back of the photographs at all, Mike.
So, but he might have been just a cover in the news at the time and coming into town. Okay, so Fernie disappears, but through its own sheer enthusiasm for itself comes back, and there's a couple of interesting stories to tell, which we'll do right after this break about both about Fernie and about some of the outlying communities. We'll do that in just a minute. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. We're in Fernie today, talking about that fine distribution center in the midst of the coal district of southeastern British Columbia. And there's a few other characters. I mean, we mentioned Bill Fernie after William Fernie, after whom the town is named, and Mr. Quayle, who you've had some dealings with. But there's another fellow who I've heard of named as Mr. Pick. Tell me about Mr. Pick.
Well, Mr. Pick was probably the most colorful citizen of Fernie. Now, Robert Thornton Lowry was there, the great newspaper editor, but Pick was there for quite a long time.
He was sort of grassroots Italian community,
Pick area,
head of the sort of the neighborhood.
Yeah, he was indeed. Came as a small businessman, and when Prohibition came into Alberta about 1917, he saw a chance to enhance his business activities.
BC was not as eagerly into Prohibition.
BC had a much more lax prohibition than Alberta did, but there was a great demand for the product. So whether it was whiskey or mostly whiskey, he decided to get into the act. And I have a lot of sympathy for Mr. Piccarelli, or Mr. Pick as people called him. He was an expansive guy. He was 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighed over 200 pounds.
Yeah. Put on a snazzy dresser?
Very snazzy dresser. In some instances he was. He was very well liked, both in the Italian community and outside of the Italian community. He was not a violent man. His activities essentially did not hurt anybody at that particular time, although, very interestingly, they resulted in the deaths of 5 people. And that was kind of an abortive robbery attempt when he was on a train, supposedly carrying $10,000, which I believe he was. He carried a lot of cash with him, $10,000 or $20,000. When you're looking at 1917 or 18, Mike, that's a lot of money. Multiply that by 40, and you're looking at $400,000 to $800,000. So 3 individuals got on the train, held up the train, looking for Mr. Pick. He was not well dressed that time. As they came down the car, emptying everyone's wallet, hoping to find Mr. Pick, he shifted seats and left the wad of cash on the empty seat across the aisle, tucked in behind the seat. All he had was a little bit of cash in his pocket, evidently. They came down, didn't recognize him, took the cash out of his pockets, left the train in a hurry after threatening everybody, and took about $400 and split when they got outside. 2 of them went one way and one went another way. One went across the line. One stayed in the general area. At least 2 stayed in the general area. And eventually they were cornered and there was a shootout. One of the policemen was killed. One of these individuals was killed. In the ensuing manhunt, one escaped. Another policeman accidentally shot and killed another policeman. This guy was hanged, the second survivor of the gang, and the third one was eventually brought back for trial into Canada and died in prison.
So Mr. Pick in this case was an innocent victim of other hoodlums.
Yes, but was inadvertently the cause of 5 deaths, probably.
Just because
and
he was
he would have regretted that. Yeah. He was really quite a fascinating guy, and he was kind of the Robin Hood of the area. When families were down on their luck, he would distribute significant amounts of cash and other goods at Christmas time to make sure they could tide themselves over. So, you know, I haven't a lot of sympathy for rum runners or bootleggers, but if ever I did have sympathy, I think Mr. Pick would be at the top of my list.
So many colorful characters in these mining towns, and so many, as we've already alluded to, so many different nationalities there. Now, you alluded in the fire story to about the fact that people weren't even able to save any of their precious belongings. Did they go through the wreckage and sift for it and try and find it, or what happened to all the wealth of Fernie after the fire?
I think most people anticipate that gold and silver is going to burn up in a fire because the fire is so incredibly hot. That doesn't happen. Gold is virtually untouched in a fire unless it stays at well over 3,000 degrees for a considerable length of time. Silver may be bent, but gold, you know, pulls through a fire almost intact. So that I think that, like most of the mining towns, usually they used a scraper, they loaded the detritus from the scraper in a wagon, they then took the wagon to the dump.
And so that's where all the precious belongings,
that's where the sterling silver would be, the gold coins, the gold rings, because people fled so fast, as I mentioned before, they couldn't pick up their valuables.
Now, there might be another place in this area where there is gold in the ground, and it wasn't put there because it was just dumped. Tell me about the people of Corbin.
Well, you know, I went back there in 1968, Mike, on the advice of some old-timers in Fernie. They said, Bill, they said, Corbin has a story to tell. Well, first you have to take a quick look at Corbin. Corbin had 600 people. They had a terrific showing of coal ore there that was magnificent. They called it the Big Showing. And they mined that for years until the Great Strike in 1935. There were people from Yugoslavia and other parts of Europe who did not trust the banks. And some of the old-timers who were in Corbin said, Bill, they didn't use the banks. They buried their gold and silver coins in the ground around their shacks in Corbin. Here are some pictures of Corbin that I took in 1968. Those are gone now. The old tipple was in the last state of disrepair right then. This is where the coal comes to the tipple, then it's loaded, and it's out of the town.
So coal would, what, come down in some sort of an aerial tramway to that spot and then be dumped out?
Yeah.
And here's some old buildings. These are prospectors' houses. So
those are miners' cabins.
Miners' cabins. Up on that hillside, they might have dug a couple of pits and dropped a little gold down there?
Undoubtedly. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in Corbin for decades. And so there was lots around, but the unfortunate part, I went back in there a few years later, and they'd come back to mine the Big Showing again. So I don't think there's much left. It probably went with the coal, or it's where the overburden is.
And I guess, I mean, these towns would be pretty fragile. I mean, there are not a lot of foundations for buildings like that, so evidence is wiped out.
Yeah, Corbin's gone.
Great place to go back to. I went through Fernie, I guess, about 3 years ago now, had lunch in a great restaurant cafe, and such a wonderful spot that it's worth a trip back there right now. So head back to Fernie. I don't know whether they'd appreciate you poking around their dump, but have a good time in Fernie and enjoy the atmosphere and the ambience of the place. Bill, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Mike.
Bill Barley, our historian, storyteller, raconteur, and that's it for Fernie today, but be back with us next time as we continue to tell you stories about gold trails and ghost towns in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. We'll see you later.